I thought asking for a break would give us both the space we needed and that Lucas would wait for me while I sorted myself out. But now, standing in front of our old apartment, I realized how wrong I was. He didn't wait, he found someone else. These words sound simple when I say them out loud, but in my mind, they're specific. Every syllable is filled with regret and disbelief. How did it come to this? I'm standing here in front of the building that once felt like home, but now feels foreign and like a life I no longer recognize. I can almost see us as we were, laughing on the balcony and talking about our future and dreams together. But those moments are from a time before I asked for space. Everything changed after that. I thought asking for a break meant I would have time to fix things. I thought Lucas would wait patiently for me to figure myself out, just like they do in the movies. But life isn't like the movies. The hope that he would wait was dangerous because it gave me a false sense of control. I thought I had time. I thought we had time. But life has a cruel way of showing you just how quickly everything can slip through your fingers. For months, I've been imagining this moment, seeing Lucas again, rehearsing what I would say and how I would explain myself. But now that moment is here. I don't know what to say. What do you say when you've lost someone you thought would always be there? I'm standing here, waiting for the door to open. I'm gripped by uncertainty. Is this really what I want? To walk back into a life where I no longer belong, where I'm no longer welcome. Then the door opens. The door opens and there he is, Lucas. At least he was mine once, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. A woman appears behind him, resting her hand gently on his back. She looks young too, and the way they stand together tells me everything. This isn't just some casual rebound. She's the other person Lucas was seeing. I met him when I was 24 and he was 26. From the start, it felt effortless. He was charming, ambitious, and made me laugh like no one else. I still remember the first night we spent together after being introduced by a mutual friend. He asked if I wanted to get out of the bar and take a walk on the beach. Before I knew it, we were out there. I was in his car, feeling a rush of excitement I hadn't felt in years. We spent hours talking, listening to the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. By the end of the night, we both knew this was something special. The early years were bliss. Late-night talks, spontaneous trips, and a sense of closeness that made us feel. We got married a year later, and I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Lucas was everything I wanted, loyal, strong, supportive. We built a life together, piece by piece. I had a great job, and he was excelling in his career, but somewhere along the way we got too comfortable. The adventure stopped. The late-night talks faded, replaced by exhaustion from work. Our love was still there, but it was buried under layers of routine. By the time I turned 30, I started questioning everything. Was this it? Was this how life would be from now on? The spark that once defined our relationship seemed like a distant memory. By the time I turned 32, I was working nonstop and hardly saw Lucas. It felt like we were just going through the motions. We were two people living parallel lives. The fight started small, but it quickly became clear there was more to it. I couldn't recognize the man I'd fallen in love with. And worse, I couldn't recognize myself. I thought that taking some space would help. I told Lucas that I needed time to focus on myself to figure things out. We agreed to take a break, with no hard feelings, just time to clear our heads. I convinced myself that it was the right choice. We would come back stronger. He loved me. I loved him. We could make it through this, couldn't we? But as soon as I left, I felt like something was wrong. The freedom I thought I wanted didn't feel like freedom at all. It felt like a void. I tried everything to distract myself, including solo trips, reconnecting with old friends, and diving into work, but nothing could fill that emptiness. I told myself I just needed more time, but deep down I knew the truth. I missed him. I missed us. I missed the way he looked at me like I was the only person that mattered. After 3 months, I finally decided to call him. My heart was racing as I dialed his number, rehearsing the conversation in my head. I never expected the coldness I heard in his voice. I was casual, even though I was feeling tense. I thought we should have a chat. About us. There was a long pause, then he sighed. I don't know if there's enough to talk about anymore. Mia, his words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt panic rising in my throat. What do you mean? We just needed space. That's all. I was ready to start working on this silence, the kind that feels like it lasts forever. Then he spoke again. Mia, I've met someone I wasn't prepared for. Those words made me feel like the world had shifted beneath me. What do you mean you've met someone? My voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and desperation. I didn't plan for it. He said in a calm, steady voice that we were on a break and that I needed space. I thought we both did. I couldn't breathe. Who is she? I whispered. Her name is Chloe, he answered, a stranger's name, someone I had never heard of in that moment. Everything came crashing down. A phantom had quietly slipped into the cracks of rug. While I was away trying to get myself back together, I never saw it coming. One evening, Lucas told me she works in the same building as me. I was crushed by the weight of his words, which were so simple. My heart was pounding as he continued. We started talking one day just... At first, he trailed off, reluctant to finish. But I didn't need him to. I could fill in the blanks myself. I knew exactly how it went. One casual conversation leads to another. That's how it starts. Then familiarity turns into flirtation. Before you know it, flirtation deepens into something more. I was so wrapped up in my own thoughts that I didn't realize anyone else was paying attention. I could picture them, and I imagined a meeting for coffee during lunch breaks, sharing stories that made them laugh. They were getting closer in the same spaces that used to belong to me. I felt a pit in my stomach as I imagined the moments I wasn't there, the moments where she found it was a way to get into his life and fill the gaps I had left behind. So I asked, my voice trembling, barely keeping myself from falling apart, "You're just going to throw everything we had away because you found someone else?" Lucas sighed, and I hated how calm he sounded, as if this was just another decision. In his life, he had to make a choice. I'm not throwing anything away, Mia. I'm just trying to move forward. You're the one who wanted time apart. Remember, I waited and gave you space, but in that space things changed. I changed. The word stung. I wanted to scream or argue that he had no right to move on, not when we hadn't even. I tried to fix what was broken, but the truth was staring me down. I was the one who walked away. I was the one who asked for a break. I had thought I had time. I thought we could pause and freeze everything in place until I was ready to come back. I never expected this. I never wanted this. I whispered, my heart breaking. With every word, I never wanted us to end. I didn't either, he replied, regret heavy in his voice. But sometimes things just don't work out the way we hope. The silence that followed was suffocating. It felt final, as if we had said all there was to say, and now there was nothing left to salvage. I was sitting in my apartment, watching the clock as the seconds ticked by, marking the slow dissolution of my marriage. It was slipping away from me, moment by moment. I'm sorry, Mia, Lucas said softly. His voice carried the weight of something that couldn't be undone. I really am. Tears streamed down my face as I gripped the phone. I really wanted to go back in time and change what had happened, but it was too late. I had to accept that things had gone wrong and there was no way to fix them. Goodbye, Lucas. I said the words, my voice cracking under the weight of them. I hung up the phone, and in the silence that followed, I felt truly alone for the first time since we decided to take a break. I was alone in the apartment we once shared, alone with the memories of a life I had always assumed would be there. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my marriage. I realized I was grieving the woman I used to be, the woman who believed she could, who thought she had all the time in the world to fix things. Life doesn't wait, and neither did Lucas. It's strange how life can feel like it's moving at a snail's pace and still rush past you in a blur. After that phone call with Lucas, I spiraled. I didn't know what hurt more, that I was torn between pushing him away and feeling guilty for allowing him to be pulled into someone else's orbit. I spent days locked in my apartment, replaying every moment of our relationship, trying to pinpoint where we went wrong. The silence around me became unbearable, so I drowned it out with music, movies, and anything else that I kept my mind busy with, long walks to avoid being alone with my thoughts. But the silence inside me was harder to escape. The weight of my decisions pressed down on me, suffocating. I started to question everything, not just about Lucas, but about myself. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I was too distant. Maybe the break was just an excuse to avoid something deeper inside me that I didn't want to confront. The weeks dragged on after Lucas's confession, and each day bled into the next. I threw myself into work, desperate to keep my mind from wandering. But every time I paused, every time I had a second to myself, my thoughts went back to him and to her. My thoughts kept going back to him and to her, Chloe, the faceless woman who had slipped into my life and taken what I had let go. I couldn't help but imagine them together. Were they happy? Did she laugh at his jokes like I used to? Did she run her fingers through his hair like I did when we watched movies on the couch? It was all so torturous, knowing that the man who had once been mine was now sharing those intimate moments with someone else. It didn't feel real. We all do, but one evening, as I thought I'd reached my lowest point, something inside me snapped. I had spent too long drowning in regret, wondering about the what-ifs. I realized it was time to stop. I couldn't change the past, but maybe I could still change the future. That's when I decided I had to see Lucas. Talking on the phone wasn't enough. I needed to see him face to face. I needed to know if there was still a part of him that remembered. Maybe I was chasing a ghost, but I wasn't ready to give up without a fight. I had rehearsed a conversation in my mind countless times, imagining how it might unfold. Would he be cold and distant like he had been on the phone? Or would there be a flicker of warmth in his eyes, the warmth that once made me believe we could survive anything together? The day I decided to confront him felt ominous. It was raining. It was as if the world was mirroring the storm inside me. I arrived at the old apartment building we had shared for years, back when we were still together. The weight of nostalgia hit me hard as I stood in front of the door, trembling not from the cold, but from the fear of what I was about to face. When the door finally opened, there he was, Lucas. He looked the same, yet different. His face held a familiar set of features I knew so well, but his expression was guarded, almost as if he wasn't sure how to react to seeing me again. He was clearly surprised, but he said nothing at first. There was a long silence between us, awkward and heavy, until I forced myself to speak. I needed to see him. I whispered, my voice trembling. I needed to talk. He didn't invite me in right away. Instead, he stood there studying me, as if trying to understand why I was there. After everything that had happened, it felt like an eternity before he finally stepped aside. He motioned for me to enter. I walked into the apartment that used to be our home, but now felt like a stranger. The furniture was the same, the pictures still hung on the walls, but something was different. The space felt colder, as though it no longer held any trace of me. Then I saw her. She was sitting casually on the couch, her legs tucked under her as she looked up, meeting my gaze. She wasn't what I expected at all. She seemed so ordinary, a plain face wearing. Chloe was wearing an old sweatshirt of Lucas's, her hair tied up in a messy bun. She looked like the kind of girl you'd pass on the street without giving a second thought. But here she was in my living room, in my place. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to keep myself composed. This wasn't part of the plan. I hadn't thought she'd be here. I didn't know how to proceed now that she was Chloe. This is Mia, Lucas said awkwardly, the tension in his voice impossible to miss. Chloe gave me a smile that seemed to say, I know you don't really know me, but I'm happy to meet you. I was so surprised I didn't know what to say. I couldn't even find the words. All I could think about was how Lucas and I used to sit on that same couch, how I used to wear his sweatshirts, how that space used to belong to us. Now it was her turn. I won't take up too much of your time. I finally managed to get my eyes to lock on Lucas. I just need to talk to you alone, Lucas. He gave me a look that said he was uncomfortable, then glanced at Chloe before nodding. Can you give us a minute? He asked. His voice was tight. Chloe stood still, smiling as if she knew something I didn't. I had a feeling she was holding something back. As she brushed past me on her way to the bedroom, I fought the urge to scream at her, to tell her to get out. This wasn't her place. But I didn't. I wasn't here to fight with her. I was here for, Lucas, I need answers. When the door clicked shut behind her, he turned to face me, but his expression was unreadable. "What do you want to talk about?" "Mia," I swallowed hard, trying to summon the courage I thought I had now that I was standing in front of him. The words I had rehearsed felt heavy and foreign on my tongue, but I couldn't leave without knowing the truth, without hearing it from him. "Do you still love me?" The question slipped from my lips before I could stop it. "Mia," he let out a long, tired sigh, running a hand through his hair like he always did when he was stressed. "We've been over this," he began, his voice soft and almost pleading. "I'll always care about you. You were a huge part of my life, but things are different now. I don't care about what's different. I need to know if there's still something between us. You can't just replace. We've been together for years, Lucas. I know we are." He shook his head, pain flashing in his eyes. "It's not that simple. You're holding on to something that's not there anymore. We've both changed, but I haven't changed. I insisted, but not in the ways that matter." Lucas didn't respond immediately. He looked at me, his expression sorrowful. In that moment, I realized something. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He wasn't doing this out of spite. He'd had enough of me and of us before I could stop myself. I asked the question I'd been dreading for a while. "Are you in love with her?" He hesitated, his eyes filling with a sadness I'd never seen before. "I am," he admitted quietly. "I'm in love with her," he said, his words hitting me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless. My heart was racing, my hands were trembling, and I stood there frozen. I'd come here for the truth, but hearing it didn't soften the blow. "You don't mean that," I whispered, my voice trembling. "How could you love her after everything we've been through?" he asked. He looked at me, and I could see the weight of his answer crushing him. "I didn't plan this, but it happened, and it feels right." Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them back, refusing to let him see how much I was breaking. "That's it? You're just going to walk away from everything we built together?" Lucas stepped closer, his expression soft but firm. "I'm not walking away from what we had. I'll always value that," I replied. "That chapter is over." His words echoed in my mind, and as I stood there, the truth finally sank in. He wasn't just saying goodbye to me, he was saying goodbye to us. I had been holding on to something that no longer existed, and now I had to face that reality without another word. I turned and walked toward the door. My hand lingered on the handle for a moment, as if I was waiting for him to stop me and say something to make it all go away. But he didn't. When I stepped outside, the rain was still falling. The world kept on turning, just like Lucas had. As I watched the drops slide down the window, I had a realization. The twist wasn't that he'd moved on. It was that I'd been holding on to a version of us that no longer existed. Now, for the first time, I had to figure out who I was without him. As I walked away from that apartment for the last time, I knew one thing. I couldn't look back anymore.